What is up, guys, and welcome back to another Transformers video here today. And today we are going to be diving into the plethora of lore that Transformers 1 gave to us just a few days ago. And specifically today, the Primes, the 13 Primes introduced in this movie. Now, the 13 Primes are something that has been a mysterious kind of thing that has been a trickle reveal over the last decade plus of really giving us information about the 13 Primes, who they are, their origins, and just the different ones, because this is not something that is just laid out there and explained for who these people are. They're not established individuals. It changes, their backstories changes, they've shown up in different places. So introducing them here in Transformers 1, it's very important that they individually named all of them and they identified specific ones. Maybe not all in the movie, but through the movie, through expanded material, and through the very deliberate design choices that they made, allow us to tell exactly who the 13 Primes are. And this video, I will be diving right into it. So let's not waste any time. I'm going to be going through each Prime step by step, giving a little bit of background information and some lore, and then I'll be specifically talking about them in Transformers 1 and the fates that they met in that absolutely ruthless scene as Sentinel Prime conspires with the Quintessons to wipe them all out. Or so he thought. Before going all in on the Primes, let's just get the full lore that Alpha Trion himself delivers through not only the data slip in the beginning of the movie that Optimus is looking at, but when he is on screen himself. So in the beginning, it was simply Primus, the creator of all Transformers. And to protect their universe, he sacrificed his life force, transforming himself into the planet Cybertron. He birthed the first of the Transformers, known as the Primes. To assist them with future generations, Primus bestowed upon them the Matrix of Leadership, which was given to Zeta Prime. With the Matrix in the hands of the Primes, the natural energon of Cybertron flowed in abundance. For generations there was peace, until the energon flow ceased, with the Matrix being lost. And that is what we know before we get the full story of how that Matrix lost, etc., etc. When D16, Orion Pax, Elita, and B find the tomb of the Primes and revive Alpha Trion, he explains to them the truth to their false reality. His words, "For thousands of cycles, the war with the Quintessons has been a brutal conflict, until Sentinel, the principal aide to the Primes, intercepted an enemy transmission. He lied to them, of course, and said that he knew of a meeting place of a group of Quintesson commanders whose elimination would spell the end of the war. Trion explains how it was a mission so important we Primes took it on ourselves. We agreed to meet Sentinel for his sensitive intel in secret, which was of course in the cave, but they were not alone." And with that being said, who better to start with than none other than Alpha Trion, the one Prime that survived the onslaught and the trap set by Sentinel. Alpha Trion is known as the sage and historian of the Primes, serving as a mentor figure particularly to Optimus and Megatron, early on of course. In some continuities, he even has a hand in the creation of Optimus Prime, transforming him from Orion Pax. One thing that you'll see is a repeating theme throughout covering the rest of these Primes is that many of them have a little tag that is associated with them. And the tag that is associated with Alpha Trion is that he is known to have infinite knowledge. He is the Archivarius. He knows all within the lore of Cybertron. Next, we have Zeta Prime, which is actually an installation that surprised a number of people, because usually the 13th Prime, or not usually, I shouldn't say usually, in other iterations, the 13th Prime is nameless, or the 13th Prime ends up being the spirit that is reborn, that ends up becoming Optimus Prime. When Optimus Prime becomes a Prime, he is kind of the 13th Prime, or he has the spirit of the 13th Prime, which allows him to transcend from Orion Pax. But Zeta Prime was first introduced in the Cybertron trilogy games, but his full name was Zeta Sentinel Prime, but he was of course referred to as Zeta Prime. And that is one of the first iterations we see of, although he is an Autobot, he's definitely a bit of an asshole. And that is of course a common thing with Sentinel. But when it comes to Transformers 1, they made those two separate characters. Sentinel was just kind of like a ward of the Primes, and Zeta was seemingly the leader of the Primes, because in these cutscenes we see, he does seem to be the one leading them, and he is of course the one who has the Matrix bestowed upon him. Even though the 13 Primes are equals and leaders together, Zeta Prime is the one who was entrusted with the Matrix. In Transformers 1, we of course see he is executed by Sentinel Prime, as Zeta says to him, "Why would you do this, Sentinel? Sentinel is for all the power to rule Cybertron." And he kills Zeta with the thought that he's going to just be able to pry the Matrix out of his chest and take the power for himself. But alas, it fades to dust in his hands, and it is gone until, of course, Optimus gets it in his rebirth from Primus. Moving on to the third, and actually the first of the original 13 Primes, we have Prima or Prima Prime. I mean, I've heard people say it both ways, Prima, Prima, whatever you want to go with. I'm not gonna say either or, but Prima or Prima Prime is the first of the original 13 and the first Transformer created by Primus. He wields the Star Saber, which is a powerful ancient weapon. We've seen it, of course, in Transformers Prime, and he is often portrayed, as the archetype of heroism and virtue among the Primes. He first appeared in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus, which was in 2013. As the original warrior, Prima Prime's Star Saber has immense power, capable of cutting through nearly anything, symbolizing, of course, his role as the defender of Cybertron. And of course, we got to see a little bit of the Star Saber in the Transformers Prime show, and while it wasn't, of course, the most powerful thing, period, it was certainly a force to be reckoned with, and it really messed Megatron up. And if I'm remembering this correctly, Optimus uses it to completely break Megatron's Dark Energon Saber, which was created, of course, to rival Optimus's. But when it comes to Prima or Prima in Transformers 1, they are identifiable. We see him right towards the middle when we have that panning out shot with Zeta, of course, standing in the middle and our protagonist looking on in the scene that Sentinel is showing them. We see him there, but it is currently unclear. Honestly, I can't be 100% sure. There's a few unclear deaths in here, and that is simply a side effect of the fact that we do not have this movie in 4K footage to slowly break it all down, because not only is this a flashback action scene, which is quickly cutting around between different characters, but it is a flashback scene that we are watching almost like through a Transformers VHS tape, where it's not the best footage. It's kind of grainy, it's sandy, it's made up of these particles which are moving around in the air. It's some kind of I don't even know. It's some kind of like magical thing that Alpha Trion is able to do. We see him later do something similar in combat where he pulls up the dust. And of course, this is a power attributed to him being one of the Primes. It makes a lot of sense that he'd be able to do something like this that other Transformers can't do. But basically, that is the same thing. The same thing can be said for the entire vision that he creates and this little watch face that he gives to Optimus. And of course, that gets broken later in a fight. I'm getting off tracks here, but long story short, we don't have the clearest footage and able to break down exactly what happens in the deaths of every individual. So for Prima, I am going to have to say unclear, but we can just assume that he was either killed by Sentinel, being shot, or he was killed or overwhelmed by the Quintessons. Moving on to Megatronus Prime, also known as the Fallen, who is a dark, brooding figure among the Primes. His betrayal of his brethren marks the beginning of conflict in the Transformers. He first appeared in Transformers The War Within comics in 2002, but became more known in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, the movie, of course, where we saw him as pretty much the main antagonist. After Megatron is able to kill Optimus, he is able to be free from his jail, and he comes to Earth in attempts to reactivate the Star Harvester. Megatronus' name is, of course, later taken or interpolated by Megatron as he pays homage to him and his destructive ideals. Megatron puts him on a pedestal as the best Prime, which he says multiple times in Transformers 1. And in Transformers 1, we find out that after Sentinel Prime beheads, and spoiler alert, that's how he meets his fate. Sentinel Prime beheads him as he's being subdued by the Quintessons, an absolutely brutal death, which certainly aids in pushing Megatron over the edge when it comes to his rage for Sentinel. We also see that Sentinel took his T-Cog, which enhanced him significantly. And something I noticed upon the rewatch is that in the scene where we see Megatronus absolutely obliterating, doing the best he can with the other Primes against the Quintessons, he takes out a number of them with his brutality, with both melee and artillery weapons. But specifically when it comes to that artillery weapon, there's a point where he slams his hands in the ground, and if I'm remembering this correctly, of course I'm not looking at the footage, he has these artillery missile barrage launchers come out of of his back, and they shoot at, of course, the Quintessons. And this is something we see Sentinel have something very similar to later in the movie, where we have this battle mode where he has his battle mask and he gets some more armor and he has these artillery-esque weapons. And now we know from the ending of the movie that he took Megatronus's T-Cog, and Megatronus was the most powerful warrior. And then what happens at the very end of the movie when Sentinel is killed by Megatron, Megatron takes his T-Cog for himself, Megatronus's T-Cog, and that gives him his full-on Megatron full power armor, where of course he buffs up a little bit, he gets the more powerful cannon. And so that is something quite interesting to note, that the different T-Cogs of the Primes could enhance them in different ways, which is why, I mean, I'm trying to think about this right now. This is just kind of the nerd gears turning as I'm thinking about this. Now, the Matrix itself, of course, the Matrix is not a T-Cog, but of course the Matrix we see later in the movie clearly bestows Optimus with more powers as well. As Megatron is beating the hell out of him, the Matrix starts pulsing and glowing, and then it blows everyone back, and that's when Optimus gets his iconic Energon axe, which now has this ability where he swings it and he can throw these pulsing Energon axe. I don't even know what you'd call them, but he can use it as a ranged weapon as well when he's swinging it, and we all saw the movie. It's interesting to note that these T-Cogs, obviously the Matrix isn't a T-Cog, but it seems like the T-Cogs and the Matrix also benefit the Transformers with abilities, because Megatron got upgraded, it seemed like Sentinel got upgraded, the Matrix is a whole other thing in and of itself. But when we saw the rest of our bots initially get those T-Cogs from the Primes, they were upgraded in significant ways when they got their ability to transform, but it wasn't anything like that of what we saw with Megatronus's, because Megatronus's almost looked like it was polluted or had some traces of dark energon, because his was that dark, violent purple, which was really pulsating with some authority. And when we saw the other bots get their T-Cogs, even though they were T-Cogs from Primes, it wasn't to that extent. So I'm interested to see later down the line if that will come up again when it comes to Megatronus's T-Cog specifically, maybe corrupting Megatron even further. Did it do that to Sentinel? Even though we know Sentinel was an asshole before he got the T-Cog, it's interesting to see what they may do with this, because I feel like they definitely made a point to show the significance of those two things. Moving on to the next Prime, we have Alchemist Prime. Alchemist Prime is associated with the mystical and scientific aspects of Transformers society. He often works behind the scenes, exploring the nature of reality, matter, and energy. Alchemist Prime made his first major appearance in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus, 2013. Alchemist Prime is linked with the power of elemental transmutation and is often depicted as a philosopher or alchemist seeking deeper truths about the universe. Now, his moniker, he is known as the Mystical Scientist, and it is unclear exactly what happens, but I'm pretty sure he's killed by Sentinel. A lot of these guys, the scenes, it's blurry, it's faded, but I'm pretty sure that Alchemist can be confirmed to have been killed by Sentinel. Next, we have Amalgamous Prime, known as the Shapeshifter. Amalgamous is the most unpredictable and fluid of the 13 Primes. He is a shapeshifter with the ability to change his form at will, and he represents adaptability and creativity. His first appearance is in Transformers, again, The Covenant of Primus, 2013, if you're noticing the pattern there. Unfortunately, again, his death is unclear, but is likely due to the Quintessons. Next, we have Micronus Prime. Micronus is the smallest and most agile of the Primes. He represents the concept of teamwork, often aiding his fellow Primes by sharing power with them. Micronus first appeared in Transformers: Robots in Disguise in 2015 as part of the lore expanding on the 13 Primes. Micronus is connected to the Minicons, which are a faction of Transformers that are smaller in size but can enhance the powers of larger Transformers when they are bonded. Micronus, of course, with the moniker Power Swap, is not necessarily one of the more popular Primes if you know the origins of the show, where he comes from, but nevertheless, he is also kind of unclear / killed by Sentinel. Next up, we have Liege Maximo. Liege Maximo is a manipulative and cunning Prime, often depicted as a villain. He embodies deceit and treachery, and his actions play a part in the eventual downfall of the Primes. He first appeared in Transformers Gen 2 comics in 1993. Liege Maximo is sometimes linked to the origin of the Decepticons due to his manipulative and malevolent nature, embodying chaos and betrayal. He's known as the Trickster, and his death is unclear. Next up, we have Onyx Prime, who represents the Beast Transformers and is often associated with nature and instinct. His role involves balancing the spiritual and physical realms of Cybertron. Onyx Prime first appeared again in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus in 2013. Onyx Prime is often depicted as a beast-like transformer and is closely connected to the Predacons, which is a group of animalistic transformers. And as you can see via this blurry picture from Transformers 1, Onyx Prime does indeed take on the Centaur-esque form with the wings unfurling as the scene plays out in the background. And unfortunately, their death is unclear. Next up, we have Solus Prime. Solus Prime is the creator and forger among the 13 primes, known for crafting powerful weapons and artifacts, chief among them the Forge of Solus Prime. She's the first female prime and is responsible for the creation of the legendary weapons, of many legendary weapons. Solus Prime first appeared in Transformers, again, The Covenant of Primus in 2013. Solus Prime's forge, the Mighty Hammer, is her signature tool, and it has been used to craft many of the most iconic weapons in Transformers lore. She is, of course, known as the Forger, and she was, as it appears to be, blasted by Sentinel. Next up, we have Vector Prime, known as the Time Traveler. Vector Prime is the guardian of time and space, one of the oldest and most powerful of the primes. He is charged with safeguarding the timelines and preventing anomalies. His first appearance was in Transformers Cybertron in 2005. Vector Prime can travel through time and dimensions, making him one of the most knowledgeable of the primes. He is often called upon when time itself is at risk. His death is unclear, but he's obviously distinguishable in Transformers 1 because his design is clearly similar to his Cybertron design. Next up, and arguably the most interesting specifically because of his potential connection to the Quintessons in this movie, is Quintus Prime, otherwise known as the Prime of Life, symbolizing creation and the spread of new life throughout the universe. He is often depicted as a visionary, but is also portrayed as overly idealistic, sometimes causing unintended consequences. Quintus is credited with the creation of the Quintessons, a race of robotic beings, though they later turned against him and the other Transformers. His first significant appearance was in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus in 2013, where he is shown to both be brilliant and somewhat naive. Quintus Prime wields the Ember Stone, which is a powerful artifact that can create and manipulate organic life, making him unique among the primes for his ability to influence both robotic and organic forms of existence. His idealism often puts him at odds with the other primes, as his desire to create can sometimes lead to chaos and unintended conflict. So, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that they don't address anything specifically with a connection between Quintus and the Quintessons in the movie, but we know that the origins of Quintessons have been different in many different Transformers iterations, and it seems like in this iteration they are not having any connection with the fact that we know in other iterations the Quintessons are sometimes the creators of Transformers, but in this one it is established very clear, no, Primus is the creator of all Transformers, it originates from there, and they do seem to be going with the one of Quintus creating the Transformers. Will that be the case for the Transformers 1 continuity? Who knows, but maybe that is something we can find out further down the line with exploring the primes more in depth in another project. Last but not least, we have Nexus Prime, otherwise known as the Combiner Prime, and like he's known, he is a combiner, meaning he can separate into several smaller Transformers, which of course represents the different unity and competency that many can make up into one. And Nexus is actually the first Transformer to be killed by Sentinel in the ambush/betrayal. And that is that for the 13 primes that were introduced and shown to us in Transformers 1. And I can say I am very happy that they actually went all out and showed us all of them and told us about most of them, because they certainly could have kept it very ambiguous, but they didn't. They told us a majority of their names, and for those that they did not, they made their designs extremely similar and noticeable so that the fans could pick them out and realize exactly who these individuals were. And we have a full picture for, I think, the first time period when we have a continuity like this off the jump. We have an idea of who the 13 primes were, and we can only go further from here when it comes to uncovering more of their backstory and the history of Cybertron, which is so awesome, and there's so much they can do with this. Obviously, we're going to have Transformers 2 and the story could progress, but now there's so much with these primes. I mean, just the one scene we saw of them, which of course was the scene of their death, but I mean, I mean, me personally, I know there's a lot of other people which would be completely interested in more stories just following those primes and their crusades and the origin of Cybertron and stuff like that. There's so much to go on here. And a whole other thing, I'm pretty sure these guys are all going to be getting toys, if not this year, of course, probably next year and the following years, because there's a whole new Prime toy line which is coming, and I really hope they take a lot of inspiration from a lot of these designs, because man, these guys looked really badass on screen. Even though they were fighting to their deaths and dying, they looked fantastic, and I want to see more of these guys individually. It would have been awesome to see what more of them could have transformed into, because we saw what Sentinel was. We saw what Alpha Trion was, so could you only imagine what the rest of these guys were? And of course, we know some specific other primes. We know some of them transform not into vehicles. We know there's beast transformers. We know there's entity, time travelers, shapeshifters. There's so much they can do with these guys. And with the animation we got in this first movie, and with the abilities that they showed Alpha Trion to have, I could only imagine what it would look like just seeing a fraction of the potential of some of these other primes in combat or in full-on war, when they're not just being ambushed in a small little cave outnumbered by hundreds of forces. Because you could obviously say, oh, well, why didn't they do anything there? This is their guard is down and they are completely overwhelmed. This was a scenario that even the best of the primes, they could not have prepared for, because they were being betrayed by a fellow warrior who is supposed to be someone that could be a future member of them, and is someone that they're raising up and has the most close vested interest to their group. So it totally makes sense how they would be able to be caught off guard, but still, I would love to see them in their primes, no pun intended, and see what they could really do as not getting just stabbed in the back and ran up on. But with that being said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Who are your favorite primes? Did you like seeing your favorite prime in live action? Do you like some of the changes or additions they made, or some of the things they didn't do? Let me know in the comments down below. Likes, dislikes, anything is appreciated. Stay tuned for the next Transformers 1 upload, and until next time, peace.